What's going on? Welcome to the episode. Today we are talking about cardio, and more specifically, zone 2 cardio. So this is something that I have implemented more of recently into my training routine, and I've noticed a whole bunch of benefits. A lot more benefits than I actually expected to see, which has been really cool. And so I want to share it with you so that you can reap the rewards as well if you'd like to. So we're going to cover what zone 2 cardio actually is, how you can use it to lose some fat, improve your health, boost performance, increase sense of well-being, and actually even build some muscle in a roundabout way. Now, first off, what is zone 2 cardio? You may have seen those little charts that used to be on pieces of cardio equipment with those 5 general heart rate zones, and this is what we're referring to more or less. And so, zone 1 would be something like a very light walk, and zone 2 would be just above that, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And then zone 3, 4, and 5 all increase in intensity, and zone 5 is essentially an all-out sprint, or high-intensity interval training, or HIIT for short. Now, there are a few ways that you can determine what zone 2 is for you, and they are the following. Number 1, you can use a little bit of math and take 180 and subtract it from your age. I am 36, and so my zone 2 range should be in the 144-ish beats per minute range, heart rate wise. Another way that you can tell what your zone 2 range is would be essentially the fastest pace that you can sustain while still being able to hold a conversation and string together full sentences. When you're in zone 5, i.e. sprinting for your life, you are not having a convo with anyone. In zone 2, you can have a chat. One more way to tell where your zone 2 range is that runners will really identify with is that sweet spot where you feel like you can just keep running forever from a breathing standpoint, meaning you're not going to run out of breath in terms of your pace, you're just going to get more tired as you cover more and more distance. So it's not your lungs that are going to limit you. It might just be that your legs are going to get tired at some point or another. Personally, I don't use a heart rate tracker to assess whether I'm in zone 2 or not. I use feedback number 2 and 3 in terms of being able to hold a convo and hanging out in that sweet spot in terms of breathing. Now, another breathing tip is that you should technically be able to nose breathe throughout your zone 2 cardio session. And so if your jaw is on the floor because you're huffing and puffing so much, you're going too hard. That is not zone 2. Now, you can do zone 2 cardio via a number of different methods. So for example, it doesn't have to be a run. It could be on a bike, a rower, the Stairmaster, the ski erg. You could even just go outside for a brisk walk, most likely on a slight incline, and modify your pace accordingly. Now, it's worth mentioning that this zone or range is going to depend on the individual to a certain degree because you can build it, meaning zone 2 for an avid marathon runner that's 40 years old is going to be a lot different than zone 2 for a 40-year-old couch potato, right? And so it's important to note that it's not just a matter of your age. The biggest determining factor in terms of what constitutes zone 2 for you is your fitness level. And that's why option number 1 via 180 minus your age has a fair number of holes in it in terms of accuracy, but it can be a nice little starting point. Now, what's so special about this zone? Like, why am I dedicating an entire podcast episode to it? It turns out that investing time in this heart rate range builds something called aerobic capacity, or your aerobic base. It's essentially your cardiovascular foundation. And it's very common for folks to think that marathon runners, for example, just run as fast as they can sustain as much as possible. But that's not actually true. They hang out in this zone 2 range quite a bit. Also, marathon runners don't just run marathons. They do zone 2 work, they do tempo stuff, and they implement sprinting and even weight training. So whether it's a long distance runner, cyclist, swimmer, you name it, they are varying the intensity of their training in order to build this aerobic base or foundation. And one of the coolest parts of this is that you can use a variety of modalities. For example, a runner could use the bike to build their zone 2 fitness, or a cyclist could run in order to build their aerobic base. And so there is a ton of carryover because your heart doesn't really know the difference. Your body as a whole certainly does, because there are different demands via running versus cycling, for example, but you can reap the cardiovascular rewards no matter what modality you choose. Now, in terms of fat loss, zone 2 cardio is a way to debit calories. And so you can think about it just like using your debit card. You buy a bunch of single ingredient healthful whole foods from the grocery store, wink, wink. You pay with your debit card and the money comes directly out of your account. But if you simply deposit that money back in via food, calories, it is not going to yield you any fat loss. But fortunately, you will still reap the cardiovascular benefits as well as building your fitness level or aerobic foundation. Now, in terms of what modality you choose, your choice is going to impact the amount of calories that you burn. For example, if you do 30 minutes of zone 2 cardio via running, and we compare it with 30 minutes of zone 2 cardio via cycling, all other things being equal, you are going to burn more calories from running because it is more physically demanding. When you are cycling, the bike itself is supporting most of your body weight, but when you're running, your legs are supporting all of your body weight, and therefore zone 2 running or even zone 2 walking, depending on your current fitness level, is going to debit more calories than something like cycling is. Now, having said that, running is also more taxing, right? So not only does it burn more calories, but it also just kind of beats you up a little bit more. And not in the sense that it's bad for you, but rather it's more fatiguing, hence why it requires more energy. Circling back briefly to exercise and fat loss, in regards to body composition, we see plenty of folks that exercise super regularly, still looking virtually the exact same as they did prior to implementing exercise. And the reason is because it is just so easy to compensate for the calories that you debit during activity via your diet. Because it may take like an hour to burn 200 calories in a workout, but it only takes you all of 20 seconds to eat 200 calories via something like a couple tablespoons of peanut butter. There goes your hour-long exercise session from a calorie perspective. I still recommend that you exercise. There are tons of benefits, many of which we're talking about right now. But when it comes to fat loss, nutrition is the tool for the job because it's far easier and more effective to debit calories via your diet than it is via activity. So if you're listening to this and you're like, Marcus, dude, just tell me how to lose fat. That's all that I care about. Zone 2, Shimon 2. This is how I would recommend prioritizing fat loss for the best results. Number 1, nutrition. Number 2, nutrition. Number 3, nutrition. Number 4, sleep. Number 5, movement/exercise. For fat loss results, diet is that important. It is priority number 1, 2, and 3. Now, what about building muscle? How does that work in terms of zone 2 cardio? It's somewhat indirect via 2 mechanisms, which are getting fitter and therefore not having your breathing be a limiting factor while you're lifting weights. Because in order to build muscle, we need to provide a stimulus of some sort, which circles back to resistance training. But if you are doing a set of squats, let's say, and your muscles can keep going, but you're having such a hard time breathing that you need to stop squatting, it's not your muscles that are the limiting factor, right? It's your lungs or your cardio, essentially. And so, as you build your zone 2 capabilities, you are no longer limited by your breathing, and so you can do more work or more reps and therefore build more muscle. For example, if you do a set of squats with 100 pounds and your breathing is too labored to keep going after 10 reps, but your legs could easily make it to 15 or 20, once you build your lungs up, you can then do 15 or 20 reps and yield more muscle growth because your legs are then the limiting factor and not your breathing. The second way that zone 2 cardio can help you build muscle is somewhat similar, and it's that you can get more total work done in the same time frame. So building off of our 100-pound squat example, not only can you do more in a given set, i.e. doing 15 or 20 reps instead of 10, you can recover better between sets and therefore minimize the time that you need to rest, get more total work done, and therefore yield more muscle. For example, let's say that you have an hour to do your workout. If you're able to rest less between sets via better recovery, you can get more total sets done in that hour-long period, which yields more repetitions and therefore more muscle. Now, to be fair, zone 2 cardio does require time, right? So a 30-minute zone 2 run or bike session requires 30 minutes of you. And so that is a time investment. However, the cool thing is that it's far easier to maintain fitness than it is to build it in the first place. Meaning, maybe you're doing 3 to 4 30-minute zone 2 sessions per week for a month. Once you build that aerobic capacity, you can almost certainly maintain it on only 1 to 2 30-minute zone 2 sessions per week. And so you can think about this like an investment. It does require more of you up front, but then in order to maintain it, it takes far less effort. Maintaining muscle is actually the exact same. For example, if you train 4 to 5 times per week and build X amount of muscle, once that muscle is built, you can maintain that muscularity and strength on like 2 sessions per week. And so it's far easier to maintain fitness than it is to build it in the first place. Meaning, maintaining a certain level of fitness is just like language. Learning a language from scratch is super difficult, but then maintaining what you've learned takes like 5 or 10% of what it required to learn that language to begin with. Also, it's worth mentioning that aerobic fitness can be built really fast. If you consistently do zone 2 cardio for 30 days, you're going to notice substantial benefits. Whereas something like building muscle takes so much longer. It's a very slow process, relatively speaking. Now, if you're thinking about implementing some of this zone 2 stuff, I would recommend being aware of the following. Number one, the most important point is, this is not a replacement for your daily step counts unless your zone 2 happens to fall within a walking range for you as an individual. Meaning, doing your zone 2 cardio on a bike or a rower or even via running is not a replacement for your daily step counts. I would recommend having this be an add-on or a bonus to that, because in terms of just balancing out your body, injury prevention, mental and emotional well-being, etc., walking or steps hang out in a category of their own. They take priority. Number two, start slow. Meaning, don't go from 0 to hero and do 7 zone 2 sessions per week, especially if you're going to implement your zone 2 sessions via running. Because again, it is more taxing And not scaling up slowly, especially in terms of running specifically, is a recipe for injury. Injuries as a whole are rarely a result of moving improperly once and then injuring yourself. They are far more often a result of folks getting too excited and doing too much activity too soon. And so start with like 2 or maybe 3 zone 2 sessions per week. That's where I started, and I've actually stayed. I do 2 or max 3 zone 2 sessions weekly. You really don't need all that much of this stuff to see great benefits. Side note, if you're interested in me laying out my entire workout program for you, let me know and I'd be happy to put that podcast episode together. Also, a great way to prevent potential injury, aside from scaling up nice and slowly, is to vary the zone 2 modality that you use. And so maybe once per week you run and once per week you bike, or once per week you row and once per week you do the ski erg. Variety is your friend in terms of movement patterns. The third thing to be aware of is that it's important to stay consistent, just because you're not going to see all that much benefit if you don't. For example, if you do a zone 2 session this week and then skip a week or two and then toss another in, it's not bad by any means. You're moving, right? It's just that really noticing the benefits does require consistency, much like nutrition for fat loss. If you're starting your diet over every second or third Monday, you're just spinning your wheels from a fat loss result standpoint. Consistency is key. Now, if you are crunched for time, I help busy professionals lose fat and get healthy. And so scheduling is a huge factor in regards to all of this lifestyle stuff. And so if you're thinking, I don't have time to add more exercise into my routine, no problem. Just prioritize your nutrition, get your steps in. And then if you have time on top of that, feel free to mix in some weight training and or zone 2 cardio. It's super important to be realistic and practical between kids, work, friends. Like, don't beat yourself up if you choose to prioritize hanging with your family over this stuff. So again, if you fall into this I've got enough on my plate category, you will see the biggest benefits from dialing in your diet first and foremost, followed by sleep, and then movement. And when it comes to movement, do your 10K steps first and then decide if you'd like to allocate more time to fitness via something like weight training or this zone 2 cardio stuff. Prioritization is massive in terms of getting results, especially when time is a limiting factor, because we're not professional athletes here. It is not your job to work out. And so you want to get the best return on your investment, i.e. the biggest bang for your buck. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. On Instagram, I'm at N1Fitness. On TikTok, I'm at the N1Fitness. And on YouTube, I'm at Marcus Sadu. Feel free to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform if you'd like to, of course, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. I hope that you found this Zone 2 stuff interesting, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya!